My name is Elena. I just turned 28, and for my birthday, I received the kind of gift that doesn't come in a box. It comes in a moment of clarity so sharp it cuts your life in two. Last Saturday, 7:30 p.m., I was wearing the dress I knew Liam loved. He'd texted me earlier that afternoon, "Come to my place at 7:30 sharp. I'm throwing you the surprise you deserve. Don't be late, birthday girl." I felt like the luckiest woman alive. Liam was 26, charming, and we'd been together for 18 months. We were at that stage, the talking about forever stage. I used my key to open his door. The apartment was pitch black. My heart was racing with that nervous, happy energy you only get when you know you're loved. The lights flashed on. Surprise! Confetti cannons popped. About 20 of our friends were there, huddled in the living room. Balloons drifted against the ceiling. A massive banner hung across the far wall. Happy 28th birthday. But nobody was looking at me. The room went dead silent the second the door clicked shut behind me. Everyone's eyes were glued to the center of the room. There was Liam, his arm draped possessively around a tall, blonde woman. Sarah, his ex-girlfriend, the one he told me was ancient history. She was holding a cupcake with a single candle, smiling up at him. They looked like a portrait of a happy couple. Liam's face didn't just drop. It drained of all color, turning a sickly, translucent white. "Elena?" he whispered. Sarah looked at me, then back at Liam, her brow furrowing. "Oh, hey, Elena, right?" I stood there, a bouquet of flowers in my hand that I'd bought for him, because I thought we were celebrating together. I remembered a conversation from a year ago, a passing comment Liam made about how weird it was that he and Sarah shared the same birthday, November 2nd. He hadn't forgotten my birthday. He had chosen hers. He'd invited me to his apartment at the exact time of the surprise party he threw for his ex while we were still dating. The cruelty of the mistake was so massive it felt like a physical weight in the room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked straight up to Liam. The silence was so heavy you could hear the air conditioning hum. I looked Sarah in the eye, then looked at Liam. "Happy birthday, Liam," I said, my voice steady like a surgeon's blade. "I hope it's everything you wanted." I reached out and shook his hand. His palm was sweaty. He looked lost, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I turned, walked out the door, and closed it softly. No slamming. No drama. Just the sound of a deadbolt sliding into place on a life I no longer lived. I was halfway to my car when the apartment door flew open. "Elena, wait, please!" It was Liam. He was stumbling, trying to put on a jacket. Sarah was standing in the doorway behind him, looking confused and humiliated. I got into my driver's seat and locked the doors. He started pounding on the glass. "I'm so sorry. Elena, I got confused. I thought your birthday was next week, I swear. I just wanted to be nice to her because she's going through a hard time." I rolled the window down exactly 2 inches. The cold November air rushed in. "Liam," I said, "you threw your ex-girlfriend a surprise party on my birthday after we've been together for 18 months. We're done." "No, you can't you're being unreasonable. Let's talk about this." I didn't answer. I put the car in reverse and watched him shrink in my rearview mirror, standing in the middle of the street while his ex-girlfriend walked up behind him to ask what was going on. I drove home in total silence. I sat in my living room in the dark for 10 minutes, watching my phone vibrate off the coffee table. "Please answer. I made a mistake. You're being irrational." That last one, irrational, was the spark I needed. I wasn't being irrational. I was being evicted from a lie. Then I remembered. He had a key to my place, and lately, he'd been sliding his life into mine, leaving clothes, his expensive espresso machine, his gym gear. We'd been talking about him moving in here since my apartment was bigger. It was 11:47 p.m. on my birthday. I picked up the phone and called a 24-hour locksmith. "Emergency rekey," I told them. "I don't care about the overnight fee. Just get here." The locksmith promised to be there in 90 minutes. $340 for the emergency call-out, he warned. I didn't blink. "Just come now," I replied. It was the best birthday present I could buy myself, the guarantee of a locked door. While I waited, I didn't sit and cry. I moved with a cold, frantic energy. I grabbed 4 large plastic bins from my storage closet and dragged them into the center of the living room. I went to the bathroom first. His expensive cologne, his beard trimmer, the luxury skincare he'd started borrowing from me. Into the bin. I went to the bedroom. His hoodies, the shoes he kept under my bed, the half-read novels on his nightstand. Into the bin. I went to the kitchen. His artisanal coffee beans, the blender he'd brought over 3 weeks ago. Into the bin. I was purging a ghost. Every item I touched felt like a piece of evidence of how much space I'd let him take up in my life while he was busy planning a party for someone else. At 12:30 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Liam's sister, Chloe. Elena, Liam is a mess. He's at a bar downing shots. He really did just mix up the dates. Don't destroy an 18-month relationship over a calendar error. It's petty. I stared at the word petty. He had guests, a banner, and a cake for Sarah on my day. I blocked Chloe's number without a word. The locksmith arrived at 1:50 a.m. He was a silver-haired man who didn't ask questions, though I'm sure my red-rimmed eyes and the stack of boxes by the door told a story he'd seen 100 times. By 2:25 a.m., the old locks were gone. I felt the weight of the new keys in my hand, heavy, cold, and final. I took a photo of the boxes stacked neatly in the hallway. Then I used a Google Voice number to send him one last message. Your stuff is packed. It's in the living room. Pick it up this week or it's being donated. Your key doesn't work anymore. Do not come here tonight. I blocked that number too, turned my phone off, and climbed into bed. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the need to check if he'd texted me goodnight. I slept like the dead. Sunday morning, 7:15 a.m. A heavy, rhythmic pounding on my front door jolted me awake. I didn't even have to look through the peephole. I knew that frantic rhythm. I threw on a robe and opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. Liam stood there, looking like he'd been pulled through a hedge backward. His sister, Chloe, was standing behind him, arms crossed, looking indignant. Elena, thank God, Liam gasped. He tried to push the door, but the chain snapped taut. He looked down, confused. My key, it didn't work. I thought the lock was jammed. The lock isn't jammed, Liam. It's new, I said, my voice flat. You changed the locks? Chloe stepped forward, her voice rising. Elena, you can't just unperson someone like this. We need to talk. This has gone way too far. I can, I said, looking directly at her. And I did. Liam, your stuff is in boxes. I'll let you in to grab them, but Chloe stays outside. Elena, please, Liam pleaded, his eyes watering. I love you. It was a mistake. Sarah and it was just a friendly gesture because she's been depressed. I got the weekends confused in my head. I thought your party was next Saturday. You threw her a surprise party on my actual birthday while you were dating me, I repeated, the words sounding even more absurd out loud. That's not a mistake, Liam. That's a choice. You prioritized her joy over my existence. You're throwing away 18 months over one night, Chloe yelled from the hallway. No, I replied, looking at Liam. I'm throwing away 18 months of being a second choice. Take your boxes. I unlatched the chain and stood back. Liam walked in, looking around the apartment like he was visiting a museum of a life he used to own. He saw the boxes. He saw his espresso machine wrapped in bubble wrap. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice cracking. I've been staying here 4 nights a week. All my things are here. Not my problem anymore, I said. You have until Friday to get the rest of this out of here, or I'm calling a donation truck. You can't just kick me out, he snapped, a flash of his old ego surfacing. I live here. Your name isn't on the lease, Liam. You don't pay the utilities. You were a guest, and your invitation just expired. I ushered him out with the first 2 boxes. He stood in the hallway with Chloe, surrounded by his belongings, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I shut the door and turned the deadbolt. The sound of the click was the most satisfying thing I'd heard all year. They stayed in the hallway for another 15 minutes, knocking and calling my name. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and started making a pot of coffee. My birthday weekend was just beginning. The quiet of Sunday afternoon was a fragile illusion. By Monday, 9:30 a.m., the fallout moved from my hallway to my professional life. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet, when my boss, Marcus, buzzed my extension. Elena, can you step into my office for a moment? His tone wasn't his usual jovial self. It was clipped, professional, and concerned. I walked in, and Marcus looked at me over his glasses. I got a very strange call this morning from a woman claiming to be your boyfriend's mother, a Mrs. Sterling. My stomach dropped. Liam's mother. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I had no idea she'd call here. She was quite frantic, Marcus said, leaning back. She claimed you'd had some sort of episode, that you'd thrown her son out on the street in the middle of the night, and that she was concerned about your mental state. She asked if you were behaving normally at work. The audacity of it made my blood simmer. Marcus, I broke up with him on Saturday night. I didn't have an episode. I found out he was throwing his ex-girlfriend a surprise party on my birthday while we were still together. I changed my locks and gave him his belongings. Marcus blinked, then a slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. He threw his ex a party on your birthday, and then had his mother call your boss? He let out a short, dry laugh. Elena, I told her this was a private matter and to never call this office again. But heads up, if she's this brazen, she might try something else. Just keep your head down. I thanked him and left, but the mental state comment stuck in my throat like a burr. They weren't just sad about the breakup. They were trying to dismantle my reputation to make Liam look like the victim of a crazy woman. Monday evening, 6:10 p.m. I arrived home to a sight that made my skin crawl. As I reached my door, I saw deep, jagged scratches around the brass plating of my new lock. Someone had tried to force a key, the old key, into the deadbolt. They hadn't just tried once. They had fought with it. I went inside, my heart hammering, and immediately pulled up my doorbell camera footage on my phone. 4:48 p.m. There he was, Liam. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked furious. He kept shoving his old key into the lock, jiggling it violently, kicking the base of the door. When he realized it was truly hopeless, he leaned his forehead against the wood for a long minute before walking away. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You need to give me my key back right now. You have no right to lock me out of a place where I have property. I replied instantly, that key is trash. It doesn't work. I told you, your stuff is packed. Come get it with a neutral third party or don't come at all. I can't just move all that stuff. I have nowhere to put it, Elena. You're being a monster. I didn't reply. I was done being his logistics coordinator. Wednesday evening, 6:15 p.m. A sharp, authoritative knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers. My heart leaped into my throat. Can I help you, officers? I asked through the door. Ma'am, we received a call regarding a domestic dispute. A Mr. Liam Sterling claims you are holding his essential legal documents and high-value electronics hostage. I opened the door, calm but shaking internally. Officers, I'm glad you're here. I'm not holding anything hostage. We broke up 4 days ago. I have all his things packed in these boxes right here by the door. I've repeatedly asked him to collect them. I showed them the texts. I showed them the security footage of Liam trying to break in on Monday. I showed them the Happy 28th banner from the party photos a friend had sent me, proving the timeline. The older officer sighed, looking at the boxes. So, the property is packed and ready for him? Yes, I gave him until Friday. After that, I'm donating it. I don't feel safe with him having access to my home after he tried to force the lock. The officer stepped into the hallway and spoke into his radio. Dispatch, tell the complainant the property is packed and available for pickup. The resident is within her rights. This is a civil matter, not a theft. He turned back to me. Ma'am, you're being more than reasonable. If he doesn't get this stuff by Friday, it's considered abandoned property in this jurisdiction. You're doing fine. As they left, my phone rang. It was an unknown number again, but I knew the area code. It was his mother. I answered, ready for the fight. How dare you, she shrieked the moment I picked up. How dare you call the police on my son? You are destroying his life. He has nowhere to go. I didn't call them, Mrs. Sterling. He did. He lied to them, and they found out he was lying. And what do you mean he has nowhere to go? He has his own apartment. There was a long, pregnant silence on the other end. His lease is up, she finally whispered, her voice trembling with rage. He gave notice 30 days ago because you told him he could move in with you. He's homeless because of your whims. The world seemed to tilt. I never agreed to that, I said, my voice dropping an octave. We talked about it as a possibility for the future. I never gave him the green light to end his lease. You led him on. You talked about it for months. He acted on the word of the woman he loved, and you've thrown him to the wolves over a little party. It wasn't a little party, Mrs. Sterling. It was a betrayal. And if he made housing decisions based on a conversation we hadn't finalized, that's his failure in judgment, not mine. He has until Friday. I hung up and blocked the number. My hands were shaking. He hadn't just forgotten my birthday. He had been planning to move into my home, to let me pay the bulk of the rent, while he was still secretly orbiting his ex-girlfriend. But the real shock came on Thursday morning, when I received a message from a name I never expected to see in my inbox. Sarah. The notification sat on my screen like a live wire. Sarah, the woman who had been the centerpiece of the party that destroyed my life, was asking to speak. I hesitated, then accepted the message. Elena, I know you probably hate me right now, but I need to tell you something. I think we've both been played. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sent her my number, and she called within seconds. Her voice wasn't the triumphant one I'd heard at the party. It was shaky and thick with guilt. Elena, she started, I had no idea you and Liam were still together. None. Sarah, you were at his apartment, I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. He was holding your hand. He threw you a surprise party on my birthday. I know, she whispered, and I feel sick about it. But Liam told me he'd broken up with you 3 weeks ago. He said it was mutual, that you two had realized you wanted different things, and that he couldn't stop thinking about me. We'd been hanging out for nearly a month. He told me he wanted us to try again, and that he was throwing that party to celebrate our new beginning. When you walked through that door, the look on your face, I realized in a second that he'd been lying to both of us. The room felt like it was spinning. Liam wasn't just confused about the dates. He was running a parallel life. He had been courting his ex-girlfriend for weeks, telling her he was single, while simultaneously trying to move into my apartment. I left right after you did, Sarah continued. I told him to stay away from me, but now he's texting me nonstop. He's telling everyone you're abusive and unstable. He says you isolated him from his friends, and now you've made him homeless to punish him. He even asked me to back up his story so he could get a restraining order against you. I'm not doing it, Elena. I just wanted you to know what he's planning. Thank you, I managed to say. I appreciate you telling me the truth. One more thing, Sarah added. Be careful. He's not just sad, he's panicked. He doesn't have a plan B. The warning proved prophetic. By Thursday afternoon, a new problem landed in my inbox. A formal email from my building management. Notice of noise complaint and disturbance. I called the office immediately. I'm the tenant in 4B. What is this about? We received an anonymous call last night around 11:05 p.m. claiming there was screaming and the sound of breaking glass coming from your unit, the manager said. I was asleep by 10:30, I replied, my voice cold. I live alone. This is a harassment tactic from my ex-boyfriend. Please check the electronic entry logs for the building. The manager paused, typing. I see you scanned in at 6:00 p.m., and no one else entered your unit. No one used the guest buzzer for your floor either. Okay, we'll note this as a false report. But Elena, if this continues, we'll have to involve security. Friday morning, 9:00 a.m. The deadline. The doorbell rang. I checked the camera. It was Liam's mother and Chloe. They had rented a small U-Haul. I opened the door, and the air immediately turned toxic. I hope you're happy, his mother hissed as she pushed past me to grab the first box. My daughter is having to store her brother's life in our basement. You are a cold, heartless woman. He lied to me for 18 months, I said, standing by the window, my arms crossed. He lied to Sarah. He tried to move in here under false pretenses. I'm not the villain in this story, Mrs. Sterling. You led him to believe he had a home, Chloe yelled, slamming a box of books onto the dolly. He's a man, Elena. He makes mistakes. You're destroying him over a bruised ego. I stayed silent. I realized then that you can't reason with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. They loaded the boxes in a fury, Liam's mother making a running commentary about how everyone would know the truth and how I would pay for the emotional damage I'd caused. As they rolled the last bin out, his mother turned back, her eyes narrow and venomous. You're going to regret this. We've already spoken to a lawyer. You broke a verbal contract regarding his housing. Expect to hear from us. Tell your lawyer to call mine, I said, though I didn't even have one yet. They left, slamming the door so hard the frames rattled. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could finally breathe. But Saturday afternoon, a courier arrived. It was a certified letter from a law office. They weren't just threatening, they were demanding. $3,400 for forced relocation costs, $2,000 for storage fees, $4,800 for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Total, $10,300. The letter claimed I had entered into a binding verbal agreement to provide housing, and that my malicious and sudden eviction had caused Liam irreparable harm. I didn't cry this time. I felt a strange, icy calm. They wanted to play with the law? Fine. I called a lawyer a colleague had recommended. I need to draft a response, I told him, and I have some security footage and a witness named Sarah he might want to hear about. The certified letter sat on my kitchen island, a $10,300 threat, written in cold, legal font. My lawyer, a sharp-witted man named Elias, looked it over during our Zoom call, and actually laughed. Elena, verbal agreements for cohabitation are notoriously difficult to prove, Elias said, leaning back, especially when the claimant has no proof of rent payments or a signed sublease. This isn't a lawsuit, it's a shakedown. They're hoping you'll pay, just to make them go away. What do we do? I asked. We stop playing defense, he replied. I'm drafting a response. We'll mention the police report from his attempted break-in, the false noise complaints, and a signed statement from Sarah confirming his double life. We're not just saying no to the money. We're telling them that if they contact you again, we're filing for a permanent restraining order and pursuing harassment charges. The letter Elias sent back was a masterpiece of legal intimidation. It laid out the timeline with surgical precision. The party, the lies to Sarah, the documented attempt to force my lock. It ended with a simple, chilling sentence. Cease all contact, or we will see you in court for a countersuit regarding your client's fraudulent claims. Monday afternoon. The response was immediate. Liam's lawyer called Elias. They're pivoting, Elias told me later that day. They'll drop the emotional distress claim if you pay $2,000 for his moving expenses. They're desperate, Elena. The answer is zero, I said. Not a penny. Tuesday evening. I thought I was safe to go out. I was at the grocery store, reaching for a carton of eggs, when my cart was jerked violently to the side. I looked up. It was Chloe, Liam's sister. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild with a strange, righteous anger. You think you're so clever, don't you? She hissed, her voice echoing in the dairy aisle. He's living in his childhood bedroom, Elena. He's 30 years old and sleeping on a twin bed with his high school trophies because of your final answer. He's there because he lied to everyone he claimed to love, Chloe. Move your hand off my cart. You promised him a life. You're a monster. Everyone knows it, she shouted. People began to stare. I didn't engage. I walked away, but she followed me through 3 aisles, screaming about how I'd ruined him until store security finally intervened and escorted her out. My hands didn't stop shaking until I was locked inside my car. Wednesday morning. The escalation turned criminal. 2 detectives arrived at my door. Ms. Elena Vance? We're following up on a report filed by a Mr. Liam Sterling. He claims that $2,800 worth of electronics, a high-end laptop, a tablet, and professional camera gear were missing from the boxes he collected from your residence. My heart stopped. I didn't take anything. Everything he had in my apartment was packed and accounted for. Do you have proof of the contents of those boxes, ma'am? I led them to my laptop. I have something better. I have security footage of his mother and sister loading those exact boxes. They didn't complain then. I also have the footage of the police officers who were here on Wednesday watching me pack those items. I showed them the timestamps. I showed them the video of Chloe and Mrs. Sterling hauling the bins, laughing and mocking me as they did it. They didn't look like people who were missing thousands of dollars in gear. If this is a false report, Ms. Vance, the detective said, closing his notebook, there will be serious consequences for Mr. Sterling. Filing a false police report is a felony in this state. I hope so, I whispered. Thursday morning. The battle moved to my doorstep once again. I was leaving for work when I saw it. My white car had been transformed. Deep, jagged letters had been keyed into the driver's side door, stretching from the front fender to the rear. Abuser. The words screamed at me in raw, scratched metal. My stomach turned. $1,900 in damage. Easily. I didn't even have to check the cameras to know who was behind this, but I checked anyway. 3:30 a.m. A figure in a dark hoodie, face obscured, moving with a familiar, frantic gait. They knew exactly where the camera's blind spot was, or so they thought. They hadn't realized I'd installed a secondary hidden cube camera in the tree overlooking the driveway just 2 days ago. I had the face, I had the footage, and I was done being the reasonable one. The image on my phone screen was grainy, but undeniable. Under the amber glow of the street lamp, the hoodie slipped back just enough for the cube camera to catch the sharp angle of Liam's jaw and the panicked darting of his eyes. He looked like a man possessed, his hand moving in a rhythmic, violent motion as he carved the word abuser into my property. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I sent the file directly to Elias and the detectives who had visited me the day before. Thursday afternoon. I was in a strategy meeting at work when my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Stop ruining my life or this gets worse. I have nothing left to lose. Don't think you've won. I screenshotted it, added it to the folder, and went back to my meeting. I was no longer a participant in his drama. I was a witness to his collapse. Friday morning. The climax moved to the courtroom. Liam had filed for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I was stalking him, harassing his family, and systematically destroying his livelihood. I arrived with Elias. On the other side of the aisle sat Liam, looking gaunt and jittery, flanked by his mother and a lawyer who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Miller, flipped through Liam's petition. "Mr. Sterling, you claim the defendant is stalking you. Do you have evidence?" "She shows up where I am, Your Honor," Liam said, his voice cracking. "She was at the grocery store on Tuesday intimidating my sister. She's turned my friends against me. She got me evicted." "She got you evicted?" Judge Miller asked, peering over her spectacles. I had to leave my apartment because I thought I was moving in with her, and then she maliciously broke the agreement." Elias stood up calmly. "Your Honor, if I may, we have the electronic logs from the building management showing my client never agreed to a move-in. More importantly, we have a statement from a Ms. Sarah Miller, who was being courted by the plaintiff during the time he claims he was committed to moving in with my client." The judge reviewed the documents. Then she looked at the photos of my keyed car and the abuser graffiti. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, her voice dropping to a dangerous level of calm, "according to the police report from 2 days ago, you are the primary suspect in a felony vandalism case involving the defendant's vehicle. I am also looking at a report from your own detectives stating that your claim of stolen electronics was unfounded and likely fraudulent." Liam's mother tried to stand up. "She's lying. She's manipulated the footage." "Sit down, ma'am," the judge barked. She turned back to Liam. "Not only am I denying your petition for a restraining order, but based on the evidence of harassment, workplace interference, and vandalism presented by the defense, I am granting a temporary order of protection in favor of Ms. Vance." Liam looked like he'd been struck. "You are to stay 100 yards away from her, her home, and her place of employment," Judge Miller continued. "No contact, no third-party messages. If you or your family members contact her again, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" Liam whispered a yes that was barely audible. Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Sterling screamed at me across the parking lot, her face contorted with rage. "You've destroyed him. You've put a mark on his record. You're a monster." Elias stepped in front of me, his hand raised. "Careful, Mrs. Sterling. You're within 100 yards of my client, and the order includes indirect contact. Would you like to spend the afternoon in a cell?" She froze, the words dying in her throat. They retreated to their car, and for the first time in 6 days, the air felt clean. It has been 5 weeks since that birthday party. Here is where the dust has finally settled. The car. Insurance covered the $1,100 in damage after the police report. Liam is currently facing charges for felony vandalism. His lawyer tried to negotiate a settlement, but I refused to drop the charges. He needs to learn that actions have permanent signatures. The restraining order. Liam violated it 8 days after it was issued. He showed up at my apartment building at 2 a.m., crying and begging through the intercom for me to tell the truth. Building security called the police. He spent the night in jail and now has a 2-year permanent restraining order on his record. His career. Liam worked in marketing. Word got back to his firm about the arrest and the false police report. In an industry built on reputation, a felony vandalism charge and a restraining order are a death sentence. He was let go last week. The social circle. The truth came out in a flood. Once Sarah told her story, and the abuser graffiti was linked back to him, the friends who had initially sided with him vanished. He didn't just lose a girlfriend, he lost his entire support system. Me. I'm doing more than fine. I got my car fixed. I have a new security system that I hopefully never have to use. And most importantly, I'm seeing someone new. I met him through a mutual friend. On our 3rd date, I told him the short version of the birthday party saga. He sat there for a moment, stunned. Then he asked, "Wait, he threw a party for his ex on your birthday? What an absolute idiot." It was the best reaction I've ever had. What I learned through all of this is that walking out of that party without a scene wasn't weakness. It was a strategic retreat. By staying calm, I forced him to be the one to escalate. I let his own panic and entitlement pull the trigger on his life. Yesterday, I walked into a surprise party for a coworker. When the lights went up and everyone yelled, "Surprise!" I didn't flinch. I just smiled. Because I know that no matter what, I'm the one who finally got the best gift of all, freedom.